Thank you. I don't know if anyone easily, I have a version of the land acknowledgement I can pull up if needed, but if you have one that can be put in the chat, that might be, I can use that one if it's easily accessible. Otherwise, I've got one.
Yeah, Tracy's just going to chat it to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Knack, I know we're just a minute early, but are you okay if I read out the emergency response and evacuation procedures before we get called to order?
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just before we begin, I just want to quickly go over the emergency response plan for the room. So if there is an emergency, everybody needs to evacuate through the nearest safe exit. So those seated in the gallery are going to take direction from our security colleagues that I think are at the back up there, and they're going to give us a wave. And council members, if you can take direction from myself on which way to go when we do evacuate, please proceed down the stairwell and take the stairs to ground level and evacuate through the outer doors and go to the muster point. And friendly reminder for all of you listening that the muster point location is just at the end of the fountain. Anybody with limited mobility should identify themselves either to security or to myself. And if anybody needs first aid, if they could let myself or security know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, let's call this meeting to order at doing the time conversion 1:30. And we'll start with a land acknowledgement. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and the Métis homeland, and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. So thanks everyone, and just my apologies for chairing virtually. I am away on city business, as is our vice chair, and so we are both virtual, and so you're stuck with a virtual chair, and I'll do my best to try to manage that as we go through. So let's start with a roll call, and I'm going to keep everyone on their toes and do it slightly different using the council selections sheet, which is, I think, alphabetical order, other than first the vice chair, Councillor Rutherford.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Councillor Cartmell. No Councillor Cartmell yet. Councillor Hamilton? Not hearing Councillor Hamilton yet. Councillor Jans? All right, we're doing great. We'll see if we have, do we have quorum? Did I start the meeting too early? Councillor Paquette?
Hello.
Hello. Okay, good. That's 3. Councillor Principe? Oh, wait, yeah, sorry. Councillor Principe is not going to be able to join us and gave us advance notice of that. Councillor Rice?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Salvador?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Stevenson?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Tang?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Wright?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And I think I saw Councillor Hamilton just join in as well. Is that correct?
Yes, good afternoon.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Thank you. We'll do a motion to adopt the agenda. I think there were a few adjustments. So, Councillor Hamilton, do you have those in front of you?
I do not, but
so
I can read them in though.
Sure.
I'll move that the May 7, 2024 Council Services Committee agenda be adopted with the following changes: the addition of item 7.3, Community Ward Budget Update Verbal Report, and the deletion of item 7.2, 2024 Common Travel Budget.
Thank you. Please vote.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Why are we
Sorry about that.
deleting 7.2?
So there was an additional request that was made at Agenda Review Committee because a request had come in from a councillor to add a travel request. And when I followed up with the councillor, they withdrew it. And so I don't have a report anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought we weren't done with the last discussion, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Great. I don't see anyone else on the board for questions, so please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel.
Yes, for me.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. Just to confirm, Councillor Jans, are you with us? We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the votes. And that is carried. Next, approval of the minutes. Can I have somebody move the approval of the minutes?
Sure, I can move approval of the September 15th, 2023 Council Services Committee and the December 8th, 2023 Special Council Services Committee.
Thank you very much. Any questions on those? Not seeing anyone on the board. Please vote for the approval of the minutes.
Yes, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Cartmel. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the votes. And that is carried. Protocol items. I don't believe I saw any ahead of time, so I think we're good on that. Next is selection of items for debate. So I'll look to the board for folks who would like to select items. And I see on the board, Councillor Stevenson. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to select 9.1.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Wright.
I'll select 6.1 and 7.1, please.
6.1 and 7.1. And anyone for 7.3? Is a verbal report, so I feel like.
Sure, I will select that.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette has selected 7.3. So that means we have selected all items because 7.2 was deleted. So we do not need to make a motion on items not selected for debate because they all have been. So we'll move on to requests to speak. Surprisingly, when I saw the sheet about 45 minutes ago, there was no one registered to speak. I imagine that must have changed by now. Council services? No? Shockingly? No. Oh, wow. Still. What a shame. Okay, next. I saw a few people smile. I'm going to keep doing that joke every meeting. It gets funnier each time I do it. Next, request for time specific on the agenda. I don't see any.
Councillor Knapp, can I just make a quick suggestion? And I wanted to see what was selected for debate.
Yes.
Since clerks need to be here for the whole meeting, our colleagues from Legal and Employee Services are already here for 9.1. Would it make sense to deal with that item first so that you could deal with their item, then they could enjoy the rest of their day? Because the rest of us will be here till the meeting's over. I don't know if
I think that's. I heard somebody move that motion. Is that correct?
Moved to bring 9.1 forward. I can't.
Yeah, we're technically making it time specific, so you're just moving it to make that first item of business.
Correct.
Perfect. Then please vote to make that time specific.
Thank you. Tracy's just sending out the vote.
Yes, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried. Excellent. That brings us to councillor inquiries. I do not believe I received any, so that is good. Reports to be dealt with at a different meeting, none. Requests to reschedule reports, none. Excellent. Now we will take a motion to go into private, subject to sections 24 and 25 of the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act.
So moved. So moved.
I think Councillor Wright moved that. Please vote.
Yes.
Yes, Councillor Hamilton.
We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. That is carried. We will take a to open up the doors.
And Councillor Knack, just to confirm the recommendations as it relates to 9.1, those motions can be public? Or do you want us to keep them in camera right now so that, because there might be, we'll keep them in private right now related to 9.1? Because
I can't, I mean, it probably doesn't matter about that. I mean, it's just about the classification, not about,
yeah.
so I don't see any
Let
reason
me
why
just
that would
check
be.
in with Michelle Dorval and I'll loop.
Sure, we'll wait then, but yeah.
We're good to go, Chair.
Thank you. So where we'll go first is to get the presentation from Oliver around the financials. I guess technically we should probably bring forward item 7.3. That's what it's coming. That's the report, because we technically haven't closed off the other items. So if it's okay, just maybe someone can make a motion to bring that item forward.
So moved.
Thank you. I think that was Councillor Wright.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Please vote to bring forward that item.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Just waiting for 2 more votes. Councillor Wright? Thank you. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried. Perfect. Now we can turn it over for a presentation on item 7.3.
Thank you, members of committee. I'm Oliver Zaycock, Director of Financial Services. With me is Victoria Hendricks, Director of Council Liaison Team. Virtually joining us is Harmel Kit-Rai, Branch Manager, Financial Services. And a quick financial refresher on structure of the budget and where we're looking and heading for financially this year. So on the next slide, the common budget, again, 2.9 million is our common budget. It is primarily including personnel. And again, the intent is to manage all the centralized and the shared costs, keeping all the equity held in the ward budgets. This is where some of the common shared items can be bundled. Personnel specifically, so we have the salaries for the councillors, the full salaries and benefits for the 3 shared admin assistants. We also have transition employment benefits for all staff in all offices, retirement vehicle allowances for councillors, and severance pay for ward staff. So anything that fluctuates is living in the common budget in personnel. Beyond that, we have common travel and conferences. And again, this aligns with our common travel plan that's approved by Council Services Committee, roughly $73,000 annually. Then we have furniture as well, and we have the common budget for furniture, and that's also set by Council Services Committee as well. Material and equipment is collection of items including office supplies, printer leases, and other random office furnishings. And then we also have some other miscellaneous items such as your leased parking stalls, postage, courier services, common office decor, telecommunications usage, and food services for meetings as well. Moving on to the next slide, we have looking at the trends. So consistently over the last almost 10 years, we're seeing a constant surplus, specifically on the personnel side. So generally, some of the benefits, we're seeing some positive variances there. Non-personnel, obviously the surpluses are a bit tighter as the budgets are a lot smaller. But we have seen, other than 2020, which was quite a year, we've returned a relatively comfortable surplus for the common budget. Moving on to the next slide. The ward budget's a little bit of a different story. So ward budgets, we're seeing recent trends where the non-personnel expenditures have been, in some cases, exceeding our budgets, but overall have been offset by savings in personnel in the ward budgets. So again, over the last 8 to 10 years, we're seeing consistent surpluses in the wards, but they're not as prominent as the common budget, as well as we're seeing a lot of pressures outside of personnel in some of our expenditures. Now if we move on to the next slide, where we look at where we are for the end of the first quarter of 2024. Good news, we're trending on budget in the common as well as the ward budgets. Not by a whole lot, but by 7 to 20% roughly, in that range. On the personnel side, again, just general savings in terms of primarily on the benefit side. We're not fully utilizing our benefit budget. In terms of travel, the travel plan is moving forward, and we're starting to see some savings from our original plan. So we're seeing some comfort that we may end up landing within that $73,000 target that we set earlier in this year. And in the other expenses, there's just miscellaneous stationary furniture and staff support savings. In the ward budgets, we're seeing a surplus collectively, and primarily on the personnel side. And what we're seeing is, I think generally on the benefits side, we're seeing a little bit of savings there, where the benefit mix isn't quite in line with how the budgets are. So that's positive that we're in this position at this point. Moving on to the next slide. So this is a bit of an illustration ward by ward. So it's kind of where you are now as of the end of March versus your budget. So for each ward, generally we'd expect to see 25% spend or less. So we're seeing that consistently. There's some variation across offices, but in general, we're holding to that trend where we're staying on budget. But again, the year is young and there are still initiatives and challenges ahead. Again, in terms of the budgets here, so we don't at this moment have the salary settlements in this budget at this moment. We're looking to have that added in the month of May. There will be a corporate adjustment adding the funds in to the personnel budgets in the ward and the common budgets. So probably by the time I have my next update at Council Services, we'll have the updated budgets and we'll see where we're at versus then. And that concludes the presentation, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll see if there are any questions on this particular update. This was selected by, I can't recall because I didn't jot
You.
it. Oh,
It was
yeah,
you.
that's true. I did select it
I think it was
because I
Councillor
wanted to get that
Paquette.
information. Oh, yes, it was Councillor Paquette. So, Councillor Paquette, do you have any questions?
Nope.
Excellent. I don't see anyone else on the board for questions. So this can be a receive for information.
So moved.
Thank you. Seeing nobody on the board, please vote to receive the information.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Paquette. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried unanimously. Wonderful. Do we want to, do we feel we can take care of the other items that we dealt with in private first before we move on?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe if we could start with 9.1, if that's okay. And so I've given everybody access to a document. If you wouldn't mind just taking a quick look at it. So there's three motions. So the report would stay in camera. There would be a new sorry, somebody's editing.
Yeah, we'll let Councillor
No,
Stevenson read.
It's okay. Sorry.
Councillor Stevenson, do you want to read in that motion just because that way everyone's aware of it?
For sure. This is for item 9.1.
Yes,
Yes, please.
So I will move that, sorry.
Great point. Number 1, you can do. Number 3, you can do. No, you can do it because you're telling me to do it and then I put it into the system and actually do it. You're giving me instructions. No, you're good.
Okay. That administration, okay. I will move that a new communication social media advisory be added to the existing classification provided to the councillor's offices outlined in attachment. Okay, of the May 7th, 2024 Employee and Legal Services Report, ELS 02423 report. The administration provide policy amendments as required to City Policy C608 HR to councillors' staff, including the new classification and alternative titles as outlined in the May 7th, 2024 Employee and Legal Services Report, ELS 02423. And that the May 7th, 2024 aforementioned report remain private pursuant to sections 24 and 25 of FOIP.
Thank you very much. We'll see. I don't see anyone else on the board for questions. So.
Just a typo. It should be advisor, not advisory.
There's many typos. Many.
Recognizing the friendly adjustment on the spelling. I'm not seeing anyone else on the board. Anyone wishing to speak to it? Not seeing anyone to click on. Councillor Stevenson, any closing thoughts?
You know, I really appreciate the review that was done by our administration to help ensure that the positions available in our office reflect the duties and demands that are occurring, and that we can, you know, appropriately compensate those roles in a way that's comparable to other positions of the city. So appreciate that work and look forward to this moving forward.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried unanimously. Excellent. Do we feel we have everything we need to be able to vote on 6-1, or would it be preferable to have a few minutes
No,
still?
I think if we do it one by one, very slowly, no.
I would take a few moments, Councillor Knack.
If everyone's okay to take a 5-minute recess to fine tune that wording and make sure that we've got something we can discuss, if that's okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, 5-minute recess. that can be made by Councillor Stevenson on item 6.1.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. We're going to take this one by one so that we are all on the same page. So I'm going to start by moving the first motion, which is that attachments, as recommended in the report, that attachments 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the January 24th, 2024 Office of the City Clerk Report, OCC 02334, remain private pursuant to Section 17, disclosures harmful to personal privacy, and 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And 2, that Council Services Committee recommend to City Council that the Office of the Councillor's Budget Review Task Force final report OCC 01933 be made available to the public and redacted as required by the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Do you want me to keep going?
No, can we just give Tracy?
Yeah, so we'll do
we can get this up on the screen. So Tracy's going to cut those first 2 parts into the system. Thank you.
Perfect.
Excellent. So we're going to be moving just those 2 right now. We're going to vote just on these ones specifically. Do you have any introductory comments, Councillor Stevenson?
No, thank you. These were the recommendations of the report. I support them, and very pleased that we'll be able to share the task force report with the public, and encourage my colleagues to support this. Thank you.
That felt like both an intro and a possible close, but I'll double check if anyone else wishes to speak to those. Not seeing any, I'm going to assume that what was said is the close, so please vote.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried. Next, go ahead, Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. I'll move that administration draft revisions to Council Policy C618B, Councillor's Budget and Expenses, to make mailouts an allowable expense within the common budget and consideration for other impacts.
Thank you. Do you want to introduce that?
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Connecting with constituents is a really important part of the work that we do. And there's some differences from ward to ward in terms of the number of households that may be multifamily and sort of not accessible for volunteer mail drop-offs. This motion would allow each office to have equitable access to connect with their constituents. And is one that I support. I think it will help us connect better with the people that we represent and ensure that there aren't pressures on different offices to not be able to use this medium with Edmontonians. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions on this, Councillor Wright?
Hi, I'm just wondering, for those for the mailouts then, will there be sort of standards, restrictions, limitations determined? And would it just be to residents, or would it also include business and commercial mailout?
So we're not increasing the budget. So what we'll do is we'll take what information that we have and we'll start with the policy considerations to make it an eligible expense. That would be the first step. And then I think as we continue to work with our partners in finance, we'll monitor the budgets, but I think we'll need to put we will make policy recommendations so that, again, that there's equity amongst the 12 offices.
Okay.
Recognizing that not all of your wards are the same, and some of the data that we have previously will help inform that. So it's not a one-to-one, but it's more based on the number of mailouts that are required. But we'll have to do some work and bring that back for your consideration. But
all right, thank you very much. So yeah, so standards and parameters will be determined later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford.
Would those standards and parameters include like the paper quality, weight, size? Like I feel like we are, I might be opening a can of worms, but like a postcard mail out is very different than a legal size mail out, which would be different than a trifold mail out. So I'm just trying to get a sense about whether that is some of the parameters in which you would be considering.
I think we would go back to some of the recommendations from the report that we talked about in September, but I think the policy would cover, I'm going to say, like a minimum standard. And then if there
Yeah.
were enhancements that you want, I'm not saying you, if there were enhancements that a particular ward was looking for, that would be over and above. But again, today's decision is that we go away and look at this and bring it back for this committee's consideration. So I think we'll have to go back and do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the costs historically, maybe beyond just this council, just so that we've got some more reference points, and then we can bring something back. But I would say there would be a minimum standard with an equity lens across all 12 wards. But you're, again, not restricted in using your own ward budget if you want to do something above the minimum standard that we have not yet defined.
Yeah, okay. And I know, and I apologize because we've had these conversations so long ago that I'm getting fuzzy and murky on the content. But was this, I don't recall this being the recommendation from the committee. Was this a recommendation that this could be awarded? Like, I know there was equity but I had understood like maybe adjusting the ward budgets to reflect that as opposed to making this an allowable expense within the common budget.
So I'm going back to my memory here, and I'm also just calling up the instructions that were given. This was an issue that came up quite a few times during the consultation. So I'm just going back to the instructions that we were given, and I think to a previous question that came up, consider how to ensure equity regarding ward mailouts and access to digital communication resources. And so what we did is we provided in that attachment to the costs, and we just gave a draft option. So this doesn't need to be the path forward. We could, again, this comes back to, does each ward get the same amount of money? And so taking that principle hadn't changed, we thought this was the quickest way to adjust the inequities. So is it perfect? No, but I think based on the conversation we had earlier today, until we address, or if committee wishes to address each ward getting the same access to resources, we thought the fairest way would be to provide access to the common budget, because not all of your wards are the same, as you know.
Just it's very, the way that this motion, and I guess maybe to Councillor Stevenson, is very, to me, a little bit concerning, because some councillors hire consultants to draft their content for their mailouts. Like, what part of them is, if it's just postage, because I recognize that there's some boards that have, like, I feel like we should be more explicit. What are your thoughts? Like, I worry about, like, when we or anything related to a mail out, that new
Sorry, Councillor Rutherford, you're cutting in and out.
to put into my mail out at a, like serious. No, I'm serious. Like,
Oh, no, sorry, you're just cutting in and out.
what are you envisioning in terms of with that equity, but also?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question, and I appreciated what we heard from administration in terms of establishing a baseline. And so, you know, how I would envision that is, let's say, everyone is able to send a 4x6 double-sided postcard to each household in their ward. And that would be, and if that's once a year or twice a year, that would be a baseline number. And then if an individual councillor wished to enhance that and make that a trifold, they could bill, you know, they could max out what they're spending in the common budget and then add additional on through their ward budget. So I think it's a great point that further work is needed. I appreciate that I heard administration is going to do that work, and I think it will you know, be really necessary when we're at the point of needing to approve those revisions that come back to us.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
One quick question, and for the scope of mail out products, so it's only limited, will be limited to the like 4x6 postcard, or limited to the newsletter, or is there anything specific defined, or just the scope, just limit the amount for each office?
So I think if there are specific considerations or limitations you would like us to look at, it would be more helpful and more efficient if that information was provided to us now. So if you want, I'm making this up, if you want this to be that it's not the mail-out design, but it's the mail-out postage, that's one thing. So we can come back with lots of options, but there are 12 offices, and so if we could get consensus around what allowable expenses includes, does it include design? Does it include double siding? What's the size? If you want to get to that level of granularity, it would be helpful for us, because you all know there's a big difference between a 4x6 and a trifold, and if you have 3 colors or 2 colors, and so happy to take that direction from you. Now would be a great time to give that to us.
So I don't know the mover. For me, my intention is not go to that detail, but my intention is from scope perspective. I would like the word office have that flexibility to choose what type of products they want to mail out. So to me, this is more like mail out postage. So for example, just the $100 give you for spending, and then but you can choose spending on the newsletter, you can choose spending on the poster, you can choose. So my intention is not go to that detail. My intention is we want to be very clear, say each office has the same amount, and then for the postage, or even for the postage including design or not including design. So I would like defer that to the mover to
Sure.
answer
Well,
it.
I think what's interesting about this conversation is that some of these costs are unit costs. So postage is per unit. The number of physical pieces of paper is a unit cost.
If the
Design, though, whether you're mailing out 10,000 or you're mailing out 5, that will be the same cost to design. I think the benefit of having it through the common budget is those per unit costs are not equitable between, or they're not equal. Sorry, they're not equal between the wards. So I think that, again, my interest in accessing the common budget is to balance out the differences that exist in the per unit costs. So that would be printing and postage.
So to me, it's not about the per union cost, because per union cost could be different based on different product. And then I think to me, this is more like about the total cost for the mail out. So you can use that total cost to decide it, to have that flexibility for your own office to decide to determine and what type of design, what type of union, what type of cost for, because you may use different like print company that has different costs, but the total amount should be the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sorry, what I mean to capture is that the determination of what we can each access from the common budget will not be equal. I think it should be based on the per unit costs that we experience, but that we continue to have flexibility in how we use those resources.
Then that is my concern. I think to reflect that equity piece, each ward office should have equal amount, and in that allowable expenditure portion. And then each ward office has your own flexibility to determine how you cast, how you mail out newsletter or mail out poster or mail out different things.
So I'll just clarify then that my motion is explicitly about having an equitable distribution for mailouts. So you will likely not wish to support this motion because it does not contemplate an equal access to resources, because our expenses are not equal when it comes to mailouts.
So is that possible, and keep that equity piece there first, and then each office can decide their own and what mail out they want to do?
Yes, that's absolutely the intent. It will not dictate whether it's a postcard or a trifold.
Yes, and then how to reflect that.
Sorry, you're out of time there.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Councillor Tang?
Maybe I'll just kind of provide, because I'm hearing too that if we want to provide some feedback on this, now's the time. And however administration explore options,
So I'm not looking for
oh,
feedback.
sorry.
I'd like a specific direction.
Okay,
Because otherwise I'm going to get 12. I've already had, we've already done
Yeah,
consultation.
okay.
We've had a third party look at this. We've talked about it a couple of different times. I think we're at the decision-making stage. If I go, I will take direction from the majority, and the
Yeah,
more specific would be better.
I don't know how to make this specific. I think, you know, our office does quite a bit of mail out, I would say, and even if it's something like each office is eligible for 3,000 per year, like to me, that's still a huge help. And anything above, and so regardless, it's trifold, newsletter, I don't really,
Yeah, and so
care.
I think the issue is that in a ward that has a higher number of households, it is more expensive to do a mail out.
Sure, and I think for some of our wards that say have somewhat less household, some offices might do more frequency of mail outs, which may come out, I don't know.
So for me, that's not the intent of the motion, because then we could all just use the allocation from our own budgets. The issue is that not every ward can afford to send out mail outs because it's cost prohibitive.
I feel like as a starting point, any way to kind of help offset some cost to make it, at least to open that door. So right now, for example, like you won't be able to because you have a lot of households, given the density downtown. Some of us just prioritize that and say, no matter what, we're gonna do 1 to 2. That's just what we're making as a priority with our budget. I mean, it sounds like we need to kind of go one way or another. I mean, ideally, I would like to see some options, but I don't think we're at that stage anymore. I think, I don't know. I think I'm. However we go, I don't really. I'm agnostic, but I think whatever way to help offset some costs for everyone, whether it's to open the door for some wards just to do one mail out a year, or to help other wards to take some of that pressure off.
Absolutely, and
Right.
the intent is absolutely that everyone would be provided with the same ratio of funding. So the amount of support it
Yeah.
would provide to one ward versus the proportion of support it would provide to another ward would be equivalent.
Yeah, I guess it's questions, but anyways, I'm good with that, and I'll just, I don't know if I can just speak now, but anyways, I'm good with that as long as that's the end outcome is it enables everyone to participate to some degree that makes sense for their award.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the discussion as it can be very cost prohibitive to send out mailers or any kind of mail, and I also appreciate that not everyone has access to electronic means. So while it could seem quaint almost that we're debating this, I think it is about access. So and knowledge to your elected officials. I think but I'm also hearing the tension around how the allocations happen. I just want to clarify right now you're talking about policy revisions. So first of all, making it an allowable expense, correct, Councillor Stevenson?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and are you, and maybe to the clerks, are you looking for direction you're looking for policy direction? I feel like much of the discussion here has been around, I'll say the amount, but that would sort of derive out of the policy, those policy revisions. Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't want to assume what direction committee will give, but start with making it an allowable expense, which we'll have to come back to this committee, or maybe we'll get direction just to go straight to council with this, I'm not sure. It doesn't necessarily increase the amount of money. It's just based on the financials that have been presented. There has been space in that budget, so maybe it's
And
enough and maybe
yeah,
it's not.
yeah. So, this seems a little bit like an order of operations piece. I think it sounds, Councillor Stevenson, like we might need to clarify the breadth of the policy. I think some good questions have been raised here. First is this just the postage, like postage, or does this include design and printing costs as well? I think that's a good question, and I think other councillors have raised some I'm not going to say concerns, but questions around that. And then the second is the equal versus equitable, or is this like essentially a subsidy? You would be eligible, or would the notion be that it would be, let's say, to a maximum of $5,000 or X number of dollars? I don't want to put a dollar amount on it, and then your office budget could cover the rest. Or are you looking for wholesale coverage of postage, or are you looking for wholesale coverage of postage and printing and design costs?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, I think that having further conversation to clarify is really important. I think fundamentally what I think is appropriate is a distribution of funds around per unit costs. So things that are different based on the ward that you represent. So that could be postage and then printing. So those are things that will vary by the household numbers of the wards. So
okay, that's and I understand that. Okay, that's helpful. So as I'm looking at your motion, we're making mailouts an allowable expense, but design, for instance, would be your design would be a ward cost. I might also suggest that, and I'm sure the clerks will love this, but maybe the draft revisions could reflect, I'll say, city standard, like what we use in the corporation, because there's a lot of questions about double-sided, single-sided sizes, fold, all of that.
Yeah.
I think perhaps it would be helpful if that was reflected what the corporate standard is, because that I would say is defensible.
Yes, and I think,
as I'll say the budget item, would that be amenable to you?
yep, absolutely. And I think that when it comes to the printing costs as well, I think again, it's like a baseline. We don't all have to print the same sized material, or we still have the opportunity to enhance, but it's having a baseline of what is the bare minimum of what you would need to get a piece of paper into every mailbox. Okay, thank you. I'm using up your time. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, a possible amendment to this motion is that after common budget, could we put in to cover the cost of postage, or sorry, to cover a percentage of the postage cost per residence? Does that give you enough flexibility and is specificity for the clerk?
I still have interest in the per unit costs being both postage and printing. But I think clerk could answer what direction they're looking for there. Or Councillor Knack.
Well, I was going to say, if that was your intent, which I have heard you state now multiple times, maybe that just needs to be made clear in the motion after the word "and consideration for other impacts." So I guess I wonder if, because we're getting close to our normally scheduled recess, if we wanted to ensure that wording was exactly as you intended, that might allow us to know what everyone's voting on.
I'm just wondering, since it's my time, Is there consistently enough funds, maybe Oliver, maybe you can ask, is there consistently enough funds in the common budget that would cover off postage twice a year to every resident in, or residents in Edmonton?
So we don't have anything allocated in our common at the moment. We would have to look at reprioritizing some non-personnel, of which there isn't a lot. So I'm not going to say no, but I think we'd have to look
I'm
at
gonna,
it.
I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
Based on historical last term and what's been spent this term. So if you just look at that list, not every ward has sent out, and that's $150,000 that's already gone. So just based on the conversations that Victoria and I have, we could estimate what that cost would be, but I don't think you have enough money.
Okay. Or once, like one mail out? Like I'm just
Well,
wondering,
there's that's
if we're going to be talking about printing costs and everything like that, what's the point if there's not enough money to cover those printing costs, if there's just enough to cover mail, postage?
I think part of the consideration here is we'll need to go back with some more information. Right now, the numbers that we have are based on an average, and not everyone has done a mail out, and it looks like from the data, I have not confirmed, that not everyone has necessarily sent mail outs to everyone in their ward. And so we would need to go to vendors based on the direction, whether it's per unit or what that includes, to determine what that actual impact would be.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're thinking too much and maybe it should just be postage. But
I will take postage. I think we got here through a task force. I guess I can't, the report is not yet public, although we did pass the motion.
the recommendation is that it goes to council because it's a council decision. But I think you can talk, generally speaking, it's not a secret.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think the principle is around recognizing that different wards incur different costs due to the nature of them, right? And so I think postage is a good way to reflect that, and if that's where folks feel comfort in at this point, I think that's positive. I think that's a good step forward. I think it's just recognizing that it's not addressing the per unit cost of the printing, which will vary by ward.
But again, if there's not funds to cover it, yeah, why are we spending time trying to flush that out, I guess? So would you take that as a friendly amendment, or do you want to vote on it?
I mean, I think what I heard was that we couldn't afford two, but maybe we can afford one. Like, I just don't know if we have all the information right now to shut it down to just postage. I think I prefer to have information coming back about the options. So if this needs to change to draft revisions and options for guidelines in how that expense is used, I think that would be a good approach.
Okay, sorry, you're out of time. Maybe I will take my round then, just because I want to make sure so I've heard to the mover you want to include, so I'm just trying to make sure we get the wording of the motion exactly as you intended, which is you wanted to include postage and printing in an equitable manner.
Perfect, yes.
Okay, so could it be as simple as in consideration for other impacts, such as postage and printing in an equitable manner, something along that line?
Yes, and I think if what I'm hearing is correct, like, and maybe with a budget impact analysis of that.
Okay, so that would be friendly to you because that was your intent.
Yes.
Okay, then let me check to see, because that was the mover's intent, if that is friendly first, so that we can just make sure we're all debating the same motion here. Noting that you could then amend it to strike something if you felt the desire to. I am not hearing any, I'm just double checking if anyone else does not feel that is friendly.
As long as I can put a motion to strike something out of it.
You would
Otherwise I-
absolutely be allowed to. Yeah,
Okay.
you would absolutely be allowed to. Okay. So we'll make that update just so we're starting from the same point of what the original mover's intent was. And that's it for me. What I'll do is we still have 5 minutes, so I'll go to Councillor Rice for her questions, and then we'll take our break. And if anyone wants to make an amendment based off the revised wording, we can do that after the break. Councillor Rice?
So we are talking about policy. This is policy discussion. The concept to make this mail out as the eligible spending there in comments, I think in general, I support this concept. I just feel like we don't need to go to that too detailed from operational piece. And to me, there are 2 points here. The first point is what type of mail out could be included in the policy. That's his number 1. Number 2, how we allocated those funding to reflect that equitable piece for each ward. So as long as these 2 points to be reflected in the motion, I think for the details, how we is per union and printing or design, this type of things could leave that flexibility for the ward council to decide how to spend this money. Because right now we're at the level to say, is this money should be eligible to be included in the common budget? I think we need to focus on that point. So in that point, my answer is yes. And then the second point, to reflect equitable allocation to each ward office, if could be reflect that one, my answer is yes. And for the detail on the per union cost or size or design or printing, no. So I think that could be leave as an operational discussion and as per each ward's office councillor to decide it. So I just want to say that, and before we're close to 3:30. But I don't know, and from mover perspective, how you reflect those and to really keep it on the policy level, that would be appreciated.
Sure. I mean, I think this is a unique circumstance where we are in control of the operational side of things. So I don't know that any detail is too small for council services, but happy to switch that if there's a desire, and I fully support it. You know, if we say to make mail-outs an allowable expense within common budget. Sorry, I'm just like what I'm hearing you say is you'd like the word equitable enshrined in there. So I'm comfortable. I'm just trying to think of where it fits best in the sentence. To make an equitable distribution of mail-out costs.
Yeah.
And I don't like the word distribution actually, because we're not actually going to get this
So
distributed.
I don't know what's the better word for that.
What do you mean by equitable?
That means each ward office receives the equal amount.
Equal amount by housing you need to define what does
Equal amount of the mail out cost. The budget, in the budget. And if, for example, if you have 500,000,
so
500 divided by 12.
So that's the complete opposite of what the motion is, which is that you can each, I won't speak to what the...
But if that's opposite, and so I'm sorry, I don't think this...
Sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, my question is like how to reflect that equitable amount to distribute to each ward office.
Sure. So maybe to make how about budget and expenses to provide equitable access? No, you have to make it, okay, so you have to amend it to make mailouts an allowable expense on an equity-based basis within the common budget.
But what does that mean?
Sure, and I think those are the, my intention is the per unit cost, which is printing and postage, which is reflected there.
But
So-
Councillor Rice is saying that each ward gets exactly the same amount.
So then I would back again, then if each ward gets the same amount, that is not equitable, that is equal. So I would suggest that you would not be supportive of an equitable distribution.
So to me, I confuse these two words, but my point is, and how to make sure this budget to be distributed to the each ward office is the same amount. It's not about each per union cost. And because that's too detailed, it's about a total amount.
I think we could probably talk over the break to clarify.
Yeah, okay, sure, we can do that.
Perfect. Let's do that. We will take a 15-minute break and we will come back at 3:45 where any amendments can be made if needed. So we are on break for 15 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Councillor Cartmel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Jans.
Good afternoon.
Oh, there we are. Good afternoon. Councillor Paquette. Councillor Principe is away. Councillor Rice. Councillor Salvador.
Hello.
Good. Councillor Stevenson.
Good afternoon.
I think we'll make quorum. Councillor Tang.
Hello.
And Councillor Wright.
Good afternoon.
Oh, we just made it. Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Rice. Thank you. Perfect. So what we'll do is we've taken our break and folks have talked. We will see if anyone has any amendments to the motion on the floor. If you do, please click on to make those amendments. Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much. I would like to strike and printing.
Okay, thank you.
And the reason being is I've just looked back at a previous mail out of about 31,000 residents, and it cost about $5,800. And I know that sort of my number of residences is probably less than some other wards. So that would, if we did look at that across 12 wards, that would be about $70,000. And looking at the report that we did receive, it doesn't look like there would even be that much left in the common budget. So I don't see the point of asking the clerk and staff to determine printing costs when there wouldn't be any money to pay for it anyhow. So I would just like this to focus on allowable expense of postage.
You're on mute, Andrew.
Yes, of course. I enjoyed talking to myself. Very good. So I'll take that motion and let's see if there are any questions just around the amendment, which was to strike and printing. I'm not seeing anyone clicking on. Anyone wishing to speak to the amendment, please click on. I'm not seeing any. Councillor Wright, do you want to close?
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette.
In favor.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. We'll just adjust this screen before we show. And Councillor Knack, I think we're just waiting for yours. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried 7-4. Excellent. So that has been amended. Are there any other amendments? I'm not seeing anyone click on. Therefore, we will move to speaking to this motion. Anyone wishing to speak to it, please click on. I'm not seeing anyone, but I'm wondering if someone's trying to click on. No? Okay. Then Councillor Stevenson, any closing comments?
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a very robust conversation, and I think we've touched on some really important things. I think looking at mail-outs is the first step towards responding to some of the task force recommendations around equitable resourcing for councillors to ensure that we can do our best job for Edmontonians. This is a great first step, so really appreciate the conversation today and encourage my colleagues to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thanks, Councillor Paquette.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the votes. And that is carried 9-2. Next point on the motion, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. I would like to move that administration cancel the Alberta Art Gallery rental program, no longer provide hospitality for meetings of 30 minutes or less, amend policy C618B, Councillor Budget and Expenses Policy, to allow for electronic approvals and delegated financial authority, and amend the same policy to allow the manager of the councillor's liaison office team to approve common event infrastructure expenses to a specified limit to add to a common inventory.
Thank you. Please take 2 minutes to introduce.
Well, thank you. You know, our teams did a really great job of looking at different cost savings that there could be within the councillor's common budget. I thought these suggestions were very excellent. You know, as much as we like to support the arts program, I think the current setup is not necessarily serving us and Edmontonians well. I think, you know, tightening up our belts when it comes to hospitality for shorter meetings makes a lot of sense. And the two amendments to the policy, the first amendment to the policy just allows for streamlining of processes, which will have some good resource savings in terms of time spent, staff time spent. And the last one, it's really just looking to pool some of the commonly needed equipment so we avoid incurring rental costs, which are ultimately borne through our council budgets or ward budgets. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to questions. Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, just a quick question, I guess, to the clerk with regards to where we have existing art in the councillor's area. Do you need direction? Like, so if we're not renting, is there a purchase requirement, or what, I guess, what scope and magnitude is that in terms of what the front area will look like, the reception area?
So the current art that's rented through the Alberta Art Gallery is 6 pieces that are primarily in meeting rooms.
Okay.
The art in the councillor's office is acquired from several different areas, including the Edmonton Arts Council and some other third parties. So we can look into options and follow up if we'd like to look into something additional, but that Alberta Art Gallery rental program is 6 in the meeting rooms.
Okay, I guess just so the question, I mean, I'm fine with this motion. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson, for putting it forward. I just would want to know if you would need any direction to replace it with something more economical than the amount we were spending monthly, just to replace those 6 pieces with something else so that those walls aren't barren, because we always talk here about the value, the intrinsic value of art.
Yeah, and we can look at some other options. I know in other instances we've worked with the archive, so we're happy to take that offline and look at some suggestions if this passes.
Okay, perfect. That's all my questions.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the board for questions. Anyone wishing to speak?
Just one question, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah, please go ahead for questions, Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, just from the art gallery rental program, does that mean that we're replacing it with rentals or artwork from the Edmonton Arts Council, from some other area, or are we just not going to have any adornment in our meeting room?
So it's my understanding if this does pass, we would look at some options that do not cost what the current program does. And so a practice that I've seen used elsewhere is that we would work perhaps with the archives, but I'm taking this as a reduction in expenditure motion.
Okay, I understand that. So my next question then would be, well, I guess I'm a little bit worried about the optics. It looks sort of like this is an anti-art kind of addition when I don't think that's what the intention was, and I just want to clarify that.
That's to the mover, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Paquette. Certainly, I think that's a great clarification to make. This is not intending to reduce any sort of support for the arts community. This was just a specific program that I think was identified as no longer being financially viable and not necessarily offering the value that that it could.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. As long as it's understood very clearly that it is important that this is a reflection of our community and our culture. And of course, that should be reflected at City Hall. And maybe this is not the location that we want to get it from, but we are absolutely dedicated to that concept. And if that's the idea, then I am fine with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. For questions, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, yeah, are there other options like to promote, up and coming artists that might want to donate their work just to be seen in City Hall, or?
There's that donations is a whole other conversation.
Okay.
That I don't know that I could go into right at this moment. So I don't have at my fingertips all of the art options. So if you want art, we could keep what we have and we could work with the art gallery to cycle through new art, or we could.
But that would still be at a cost.
It would.
Okay. But I mean, to sort of to create the ability for artists to show their work. That is what, not necessarily donate it, but just the opportunity for them to showcase their work at City Hall, as opposed to us renting it from the art gallery.
Yeah, we'd have to take that away and look at options, but it is not as simple as hanging a piece of art in City Hall. There's protocols that need to be followed and conversations. I don't have any of that prepared today, but happy to take that away and look at some options if that's.
Okay, and then my other question is in relation to the fourth bullet. Will there then be, with the policy amendment for this common inventory, would that then also outline sort of what the parameters are of different councillors' offices booking these items? That will be included.
Yep. So again, today was about just getting a bit of a temperature check. If this is something you would like us to go away, we can't amend the policy on our own. I take the intention of this that we come back with policy amendments. But like you said, if on Community League Day, do we need to provide 12 of everything, or how does this all work? So we don't want to. We're trying to create some efficiencies here and some economies of scale. And if that doesn't exist, we could come back and. We'll see. We'll see where this goes.
Okay, so recommendation either how to proceed or maybe not proceed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rutherford, do you have questions?
Just as maybe a friendly amendment suggestion, just based on the concerns from Councillor Paquette and others, could we just amend the first point to say cancel the art gallery rental program and come back with options for the replacement pieces?
I'll see if that's friendly. We'll start with the mover. Is that seen as friendly?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wonder if that's maybe a subsequent motion, because I think that there's a fair bit in terms of the budget. This was intended as a budget saving process.
So I'm going to take that as not friendly then, just hearing your suggestion.
I'm not gonna belabor it. I think that the clerk has the intention from the conversation.
Okay. Great. I see no other questions. Anyone wishing to speak to it?
Yeah, just a few words, please.
Please go ahead, Councillor Paquette.
Thank you very much. I think it needs to be acknowledged that this is a little bit of a dangerous conversation when we start talking about devaluing anyone's labor and expertise. Artists, like everyone, die from exposure. And the reason that we have art in our public spaces is because it is a reflection of our community, a reflection of our culture. And it is something that every civilization has done and every government deems important. In fact, the expression of art in its many forms is in many ways what defines us as people. So we should just be very, very careful when we have these conversations that we are not straying into some sort of position where we say that the continuance, the understanding, the appreciation of our culture is not valued, because then we are saying that maybe our communities shouldn't have a voice. And I don't think that anyone is saying that, and I don't think it's true, but I think we have to be very careful when we're talking about this to ensure that our messaging is correct and our intentions are correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the board. Councillor Stevenson to close.
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thanks, Councillor Paquette.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. That is carried unanimously. Excellent. And I believe that was all of the items for 6.1. I don't think I saw anything else in the list. So I think that means, unless there was someone else that had any motions, which I'm not seeing anyone on the board for, that would leave us to item 7.1 is our last item. And this is something that was originally discussed at committee, sent to council. We didn't get to finish it at council, so it has come back to committee. And we can, so I don't think there's a presentation. I believe there might have been a motion or something. Councillor Stevenson, you selected it, right?
I did not.
Oh, you did not. Okay.
I did.
You did.
Councillor Wright.
Excellent. Councillor Wright. Are there any opening comments from administration?
I can just a friendly reminder, the delegation for this is Victoria, myself, and Lisa Holmes, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, is also here, as well as communications. So this report came to Council Services a while ago, and then a few delays and a few bumps and back and forth between Council, and here we are today. So the report is with you, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, well then I will go to Councillor Wright, who selected it. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I just, on attachment 2 where it talks about the MGA, I don't see that attending events is being an official duty of the mayor. So I see maybe in you know why we're looking at the deputy mayor list is that's one way to sort of filter down the event invites, but it's not an official duty. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was questions when this was originally discussed that when we come back we could explain exactly what the MGA requirements were. That's why this was included.
Okay, but it's not a requirement.
It is
It's not I'm sorry, it's not an official duty of the mayor to attend.
When the mayor does attend events on behalf of the corporation, he does so as the chief electoral officer.
Okay, but I'm just looking here under 154.1. In addition to performing the duties.
Yeah, that doesn't say anything about events.
Right, none of it does.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so it's not required that we go by the deputy mayor list. Like, I'm just wondering, is it more appropriate if it's an event that the mayor's been invited to and it's in a councillor's ward, that maybe it fall then to that ward councillor?
So I'll have Lisa jump in here because the invites are to the mayor's office.
Okay.
So it's not in legislation, but it is, it's essentially protocol. So the list of events that we would normally look for the deputy mayor to attend would be things like official visits from dignitaries, meetings with other elected officials, large-scale community-wide events, events located outside of the city, events with Indigenous partners, press conferences, and city-hosted public events. So something that is more ward-based or community-level events are ones that we normally would go, I'm assuming, through the list of councillors as well as like who can attend versus the actual protocol of having the deputy mayor representing the mayor at the event.
Okay, but I think when the mayor declines it and it's farmed out to all the councillors' offices to see who's available, I think then the process that is used, so if there's 6 councillors that are available for the event, I think the process then is to go through the deputy mayor list rather than looking at the ward-specific councillor.
So that is the current procedure when those invites are received from the mayor's office, because that's been the interpretation within the internal procedures that we have.
So is there a way, and maybe, you know, look to my colleagues as well, if that is something that they would like to see amended, and maybe speak to that it maybe next go to the ward councillor where either the event's being attended or sorry, where they're having the event, or maybe where that organization is situated in. I know that's, you know, having worked in MLA's offices, I know that was one way that it was sort of filtered down, was then the MLA that represented that area that the event was being held in. And then the other thing that, so that's with the mayor's offices. Now the other posse events that come through, how are those originated?
Well, I'm assuming, again, posse related to our office is if an event comes through the website, so
Yeah.
they fill out the form requesting the mayor to attend, then it's gone through posse, and if we cannot attend, it's sent over to council services to action.
Okay, and so is there a way to maybe adjust what people see on the mayor's website for the invite, if they are requesting a specific councillor in, you know, if the mayor can't attend?
It is there already. So there is a space where they can fill out and say if the mayor cannot attend with a specific councillor.
I don't think it's all that clear. Oops, I did have it printed out. Yeah, I didn't think it was all that clear. And then I'm also wondering is the ability to set up a Google Calendar for the events so that other councillors can see who is attending, who's speaking, you know, at what time.
So I think we've talked about this before. Managing, one of the initiatives that I undertook when I came back to the clerk's office is to clean up the amount of calendars that we were managing. It's incredibly time consuming to do that. Posse was originally put in, and I can't remember how long ago it was, but was to streamline the process and to find it more efficient and effective. We share information that we can, but we don't always know. And sometimes the invitations do come in late from an organization. And so navigating all of that based on our current capacity, I'm not aware that we would have the resources to be able to maintain all of that information. So as far as I know, Posse is the best source of where the invitations come. But even if a counselor says that they're able to attend or they'd like to attend, we don't necessarily know that they are going.
There we go. That's
Sorry,
time.
my time's
So,
up.
yep, Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate Councillor Wright's idea that I think what you just listed off in terms of the formality of the events where we would want the deputy mayor in that space, but when it's a more community-based event, I like Councillor Wright's suggestion that the precedent order would go ward councillor and then deputy acting mayor list. Is that amenable? Do we need motion on that?
Just looking from the mayor's office again, we would not action that part. We would just send it in our current process over to council services if we decline an event. So the mayor attends about 33% of the events that he's invited to. And we actually looked, and it's only about like 30, not even 20% that councillors actually attend in his stead. So we would send them over to council services and then they would follow whatever process.
And I think in talking to my staff in terms of how we would operationalize that, because we have discussed this previously at meetings, so I've asked what that would look like. And there is some concern about determining who would attend, whether it's based in the ward or where the organization is from, and how we would determine which ward the organization is from, because there are certain areas that have more event spaces, and so that person may be invited.
Like the downtown. Yeah, no, great point. That's an excellent catch, and if that creates a lot of headaches, then maybe the other thing, and I apologize, I don't recall where we landed on this, but I think there's also just information sharing, because if the mayor accepts something, then the ward councillor may not even be aware that it's happening. So is there an opportunity for that, even when the mayor is accepting, that there's at least awareness for the ward councillor?
I think there's a way that we can look into that. I think the issue is that currently there's no process electronically that would tell us which ward it is. We would have to manually go and look up and see where the event is being held, and then contact the ward councillor and then send you the information. And I think it's possible to do things like that. It's just a matter of how much capacity our team has. Because we just have one person doing the work here.
Sure, no problem. I mean, I think it's not I don't have a strong desire to change it. If it creates challenges, that's fine. Yeah, and I did want to note, I think my staff noticed just recently the addition of like the preferred counselor alternative that's been added. No, okay, great. No further questions. Thank you so much.
Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the discussion. I think at the beginning of my first term, we also had, we looked to revisit how the events were assigned, but we sort of landed in the same place, which is the deputy mayor list is an imperfect list, but it's a process and it allows everyone, I think, to have an opportunity to experience different parts of the city and different types of events. And I had that experience last week. Councillor Salvador had done an event the year previous, and I got to do it. And it was a pleasure to be there with her. Anyway, so on that note, I'm going to move receipt of information on this.
Thank you very much. That motion has been accepted. Was that sort of your introduction, or did you have other introductory comments?
No, that was my introduction. I understand it's frustrating. It's imperfect. Who amongst us hasn't, found out about something that was happening that didn't make it to the office, to your office. It's an imperfect process. And I have yet to find a way to route around that, except to chat with people, a little bit of water cooler conversation, find out what people are up to.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Rice?
Thank you, I agree. And then I have no problem for this report, just receive that information. Just 2 points here. So I think the process right now and is very efficient. I didn't find any concern for the process itself. Just in terms of the collaboration between councillors and the mayor's office, and also between councillors' office. So, for example, like when mayor declined the events, and based on the process, they go to the deputy mayor, and then administration and communication prepare speaking notes for the deputy mayor, and deputy mayor puts on their calendar, plan their schedule, and prepare drive there. But the last minute, and the council mayor showed up, so and without any notice, and by that way, and then I personally experienced many times. So by that way, I just how to improve that collaboration and notice in advance to save everybody's time and more efficient. So I just want to bring that up, and for just awareness, and not point finger, and then because mayor can show up anytime and any event, doesn't matter, but just to respect everybody's time, everybody's schedule. And I just want to bring that to your awareness. That is the one point, and because by that way, we followed the process. We have everything in the policy, and then the last minute change. So if we know in advance, we could adjust our own schedule and planning differently. So just for that. Another piece is about sometimes the organizer, they reach they may reach out to the mayor's office and through the policy process and come to the certain councillors. And at the same time, they reach out to the councillors directly. And then so directly for certain things, and maybe like the organizer may not consider the word specifically, and then they should respect that word considered in that area first. I think this type of sense, and then to increase that understanding, and also increase that for the courtesy and to communicate to each other, could be very good for us. And for me, I have no problem, no issue. Any councillors come to my word and stand beside me and then do the speech, no problem for that.
Great.
Okay,
Is that everything?
Yeah, so that's his. I think I consider just to speak to this.
I think
I
that, yeah,
support.
we'll count
I
that as
support
speaking
it.
to it. Yeah, yeah.
I support
And
it.
there were
That's
no
all.
other questions?
Yeah.
Good. So anyone else wishing to speak to it? I'm not seeing anyone on the board. Councillor Hamilton's close.
Nothing further to add.
Thank you. Please vote.
Councillor Rutherford's a yes.
Thanks, Councillor Rutherford.
I'm a yes.
Thanks, Councillor Jans. Councillor Briquette?
There it is. I am a yes.
Thanks.
I was waiting for it to pop up on the screen, but I didn't see it.
Thank you. We've got you. Thanks so much. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried unanimously. And so that is a completion of the items. There had been one question that we had asked earlier, and I don't know if there was a final answer, or if that's just something that might get sent to us separately related to the overall budget and item 9.1. Is that, would we have to go back into private for that, or can we just get that answered?
I don't think we have it. I haven't had a chance to talk to Harm and Oliver.
Knowing that there will be some type of information that gets shared with us, that is, there will be an answer to that provided at some point.
We are committed to following up to the question about I'll say the immediate and then the long-term projections. We'll take that offline, but we heard you loud and clear.
Fantastic, because we'll have a council services before next year anyways, so if we need to chat about it, there will be an opportunity. Wonderful. Well then, therefore, we are finished the items. I will check to see if there are any notices of motion or motions without customary notice. I don't think there were any, but just double checking the board. I'm not seeing anyone click on the board for notices of motion. Therefore, we are adjourned at 4:18. Thanks, everyone.